Thank you, everyone, for staying after the coffee break. We know sometimes it's tempting to go on to do your day jobs. I hope you enjoyed the morning conversations as much as we did. Before I turn the floor to the next speaker, again, a couple of housekeeping rules. This session is on the record, and please silence your cell phones. So now it's indeed my pleasure and a real privilege to invite our next speaker, Mr. Bruce Schneier, a fellow at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Security, to the stage. Mr. Schneier is an internationally renowned security technologist, called a security guru by The Economist, and really someone who's been working and following and leading on these issues for many years. Mr. Schneier, the floor is yours.
Hey, good morning. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for inviting me. I want to talk a bit about what I think the current threats and solutions are. I think we heard some really interesting talks this morning. I want to try to put it all in context. And the way I think of the world, the way we all need to think of the world, is we're creating a world where everything is a computer. Right? This is not a phone. This is a small portable computer that makes phone calls. Right? And similarly, your refrigerator is a computer that keeps things cold, and your microwave oven is a computer that makes things hot, and an ATM machine is a computer with money inside. Right? A car is a computer with 4 wheels and an engine. Actually, it's not. It's a 100-plus distributed system with 4 wheels and an engine. And this is what we're building. This is the internet. This is the Internet of Things. And what it means is that internet security becomes everything security, and all the lessons from the world of internet security become broadly applicable to everything. So I want to talk about 6 lessons that I think are important to understand the world we're moving to. The first is that most software is poorly written and insecure. And basically, software is lousy. And the reason is the market. We don't want to pay for quality software. With exceptions like the US Space Shuttle, software tends to be badly written. Right? The joke for restaurants, good, fast, cheap, pick any two, works for software. And the market generally picks fast and cheap over good. Poor software is full of bugs. Some bugs are vulnerabilities, which means all modern software has lots of vulnerabilities. This is not going to change. Second truism is that the internet was never designed with security in mind. That seems absolutely crazy when I say it today, but if you go back to the mid-1980s, there were 2 things true about the internet. 1, it wasn't used for anything important ever. And 2, you had to have special access to get on it in the first place. And for those 2 reasons, there was a conscious decision made to ignore security in the internet and let the endpoints deal with it if they needed it. And we're still living with the effects of that decision. In the domain name system, routing, packet security, email addresses. I mean, all of these are insecure protocols because they were designed that way. The third is that the extensibility of computers means anything can be used against you. Now, extensibility is a feature, an aspect of computers that computer people understand and no one else does. But basically, it means you can't constrain the functionality. And when I was a kid, I had a telephone, big black thing, cord attached to the wall, great device. It couldn't do anything other than be a telephone. That's all it was. This, of course, is a computer that makes phone calls. It can do whatever you want. Remember Apple's first slogan, there's an app for that. The functionality of this can be changed by the user throughout its life cycle. It makes it a very different thing to secure. Right? I don't even know what this is going to do, let alone how to secure it. And someone could put malware on this device. And malware is just additional features. I didn't ask for it, I didn't pay for them. But you could drop malware on an iPhone in a way you can't with an old electromechanical phone, because that's not a computer. That makes it very different. The fourth, and something I heard at least twice off on stage, is that the complexity of the computer systems means attack is easier than defense. I'll leave it at that because you've heard it before. The fifth is that there are new vulnerabilities in the interconnections. This is also important. As we connect things to each other, vulnerabilities in one thing affect another thing. Right? So remember 2016, the Dyn botnet? These were vulnerabilities in digital video recorders and CCTV cameras. A lot of hackers create a botnet that dropped a major domain name server that dropped a couple of dozen popular websites. It was that cascade. A famous attack in the United States in 2013, Target Corporation. They had their payments network hacked through a vulnerability in the network of one of their HVAC contractors of several stores in the middle of Pennsylvania. Or in last year, there was a story that a Las Vegas casino was hacked. I'm not making this up, through their internet-connected fish tank. Right? You put things near each other, and vulnerabilities cascade. And they can be hard to fix, because sometimes there's no individual vulnerability. It's just that when they're put together, you get vulnerability. And there's examples of this in PGP email, with email addresses, Google and Netflix. And you see these come up, but you really don't know whose job it is to fix the problem, because the problem only happens when things come together. And the last truism is that attacks always get better, easier, and faster. Some of it is that computers get faster. A password that was secure 10 years ago might not be secure today, not because we're better at password guessing, we're just faster at it. But sometimes we get better. Right? Attackers get smarter. Attackers adapt. Makes security in our world very different than, let's say, security in a natural context. In the United States, we worry about hurricanes. And we build security against hurricanes or floods. But hurricanes never get smarter based on the security we build, whereas attackers do. So you see this arms race. You see it in ATM machines, spam versus spam detectors. Someone mentions deep fakes versus deep fake detectors. Right? Where the attackers are adapting to what the defenders do. And expertise flows downhill. What today is a top secret NSA program, tomorrow becomes a PhD thesis, the next day becomes a hacker tool. And I'm only slightly exaggerating, maybe it's 6 months. That, no longer do you have this world where governments and militaries have access to technologies that civilians don't. Because if they don't, it's just a matter of a few months. So none of this is new. None of this is surprising. And up to now, it's really been a manageable problem. Right? Now, for a confluence of reasons, we're reaching a crisis. And what's changing is how computers are being used. And I want to talk about 3 things: automation, autonomy, and physical agency. That's what brings new dangers. Right, so traditionally, in computer security, we're concerned about confidentiality, right? Privacy, data theft, data misuse. Someone getting at your data. When you see the attacks that make the news, I mentioned Target or Equifax or Facebook, it's all about someone has access to my data. But the threats come in many forms. We're seeing more availability attacks, ransomware. I can't get at my data. We're seeing more integrity attacks, someone manipulating bank balances. But today, integrity and availability is a much worse threat than confidentiality, because the effects are much greater. When you get to a world of physically capable computers, suddenly there's real risks to life and property. Right? So while I might be concerned that someone hacks a hospital and steals my private patient medical records, I'm much more concerned if they change my blood type. And yes, I don't want someone to hack my car, turn on the Bluetooth microphone, and eavesdrop on my conversations. But I really don't want them disabling the brakes. Right? In the first case, that is a data integrity attack. In the second case, that is a data availability attack. So thinking about cars, medical devices, drones, we mentioned weapon systems on stage, thermostats, power plants, smart cities. There's this fundamental difference between your computer crashes and you lose your data and your car crashes and you lose your life. But it could be the exact same CPU, the exact same operating system, application software, vulnerability attack tool. Just because of where the computer is located is the difference in effect. And these trends become even more critical, even more dangerous as our systems become more critical. So there's another lesson, that computers fail differently. So take cars. Everyone knows how cars fail. Cars have parts have mean time between failures, and parts fail once in a while. And this is a whole ecosystem of auto repair shops that deal with cars that fail once in a while. Computers fail differently. They all work perfectly until one day when none of them do. And that is a failure mode that the real world is not used to. And so an example might be Amity. Amity makes key card entry systems for hotel rooms. I don't know if this hotel uses Amity locks, but they could. And a few years ago, someone found a vulnerability in these electronic locks that allowed anyone to enter hotel rooms without the valid key. And the way you fix that is you have to go manually to each lock and update the software, which means it'll never happen. Right? Because this hotel knows how locks fail. Every week or so, one of us can't get into our room. They call a locksmith shows up, fixes the lock. That's how they used to fail. The new way of failing, every single lock in the hotel room is no longer secure, is not something they're used to. And that's different. So at the same time all of this is happening, some of our long-standing security systems are failing. And I'll mention 3 of them. The first one is patching. Right? Patching is how we get security. I mean, the reason our computers and phones, well, there are 2 reasons why this is as secure as it is. One, there's a team of engineers at Apple and Microsoft and Google that are working to make this as secure as possible. And the second is that same team is on staff to write and push a patch down to this device as soon as a vulnerability is discovered. Right? That works. It's a really good system. It's been working for decades. That is failing in the world of low-cost embedded systems like DVRs and home routers. These things are designed at a lower budget, lower profit margin, offshore by third parties. They don't have security teams associated with them. Even worse, many of them can't be patched. I mean, right now, the way you patch your home router is you throw it away and buy a new one. That's the mechanism. There is no other. But actually, we also get security from the fact that every 5 or so years, 3 years, we throw this away and buy a new one. Because every new model of computer and phone that we buy is more secure. And that's not true for embedded systems. Now, you buy a DVR, you're going to replace it in 10 years, or a refrigerator in 25 years. I bought a new thermostat last year, and I expect to replace it approximately never. But we don't know how to do that. I mean, okay, let's imagine a car. You buy a car today. Software's 2 years old, you drive it for 10 years, sell it, somebody else buys it, they drive it 10 years, they sell it. At that point, it's probably, let's say it's put on a boat and shipped to Africa somewhere, someone else buys it, drives another 20 years. You go try to find a computer from 1979. Try to boot it up, try to make it secure. We actually have no idea how to secure 40-year-old consumer anything. We have no system for that. Right? We could start replacing cars at the rate we replace phones. That'll probably cook the planet. And this is even worse for low-cost devices. At least in cars, someone cares. There's liabilities. The manufacturers are going to try to make it secure. You go to low-cost devices, and nobody cares. For DVRs, routers, toys, all of those things. Second thing that's failing is authentication. And authentication only kind of just barely worked. A lot of situations, passwords no longer work. Two-factor authentication works sometimes. Backup authentication systems are terrible. But what's happening is the amount of authenticating we have to do is about to explode exponentially. Because now if I authenticate, it's either one of 2 things. I authenticate to a device, here I use my thumbprint, or I authenticate to a service, right? I download my email. And we can do that pretty well. But we're going to start seeing the rise of thing-to-thing authentication. So imagine a system of driverless or at least computer-assisted driver cars. Cars will have to authenticate to each other, to road signs, to traffic signals, to emergency alerts. Thousands of authentications, thing-to-thing in real time. We don't know how to do that. Right? If you have 100 IoT devices around your person, that's going to be 10,000 authentications. You have 1,000 devices, that's 1,000,000 authentications. We don't know how to do that. We do it a little bit. I mean, right now, if you have an IoT anything, you probably control it through your phone. This is the de facto IoT controller. And that'll work for 10 things to 25 things. It's not going to work for 100 or 1,000. Or think about right now when I go to my car, my phone automatically authenticates to the car and the Bluetooth comes out of the car speakers, right? That's a thing-to-thing authentication. That works great, but I was there to set it up, right? I manually set that up. It wasn't ad hoc, and it's only a few of them. Right? So this doesn't scale, and we don't have a system that does. The third big problem is something that was said in the panel in one of the questions, and it's about supply chain. Right? Someone asked about Huawei. I mean, the reason you kind of got to dance around answer, because that's an insurmountably hard problem. Right? Huawei, ZTE, Kaspersky, and it's not just the US, it's not just here in Poland. In 2014, China banned Kaspersky and also Symantec. Right? 2017, India banned a bunch of Chinese software. Back in 1997, there was debates in the United States about whether we should ban Checkpoint, which was an Israeli security company. And that's actually just the beginning of a very hard problem. Right? This is not made in the United States. Its chips aren't made in the United States. Its software is not written in the United States. Its programmers carry probably 150 different passports. Right? Any one of those can subvert the security of this. And it gets even worse. We have to trust our distribution mechanism. Right? Remember that Russia subverted the distribution mechanism for Ukrainian accounting software to deliver malware. We've seen fake apps in the Google Play Store. You have to trust your update mechanism. You have to trust your shipping mechanism. And that great photo of NSA engineers slipping a backdoor in Cisco equipment destined for the Syrian telephone company. I saw a paper a few years ago, you could hack an iPhone through a malicious replacement screen. Right? You have to, in this world, you have to trust everybody, yet you can't trust anybody. And there is no answer for this. A US-only iPhone will probably cost 10 times the price. No one will buy it. Our industry is deeply, deeply international. And that's not changing. So in a lot of ways, this is a perfect storm. Right? Security is failing just as everything is becoming connected. And we've been largely okay with an unregulated tech space because it didn't matter. And that's no longer sustainable. So primarily, this is a policy problem. And this is not a tech problem. It's a problem of getting the policy right, of understanding that there's no such thing as consumer tech anymore, that all tech is national security tech, and that consumer policy becomes national security policy, that an interconnected doll with a vulnerability can affect a power plant. And this is hard to realize. So I just finished a book on a lot of this. And someone actually had a copy to sign, so I'll hold it up. It's the great title of Click Here to Kill Everybody. And I talk a lot about different ways to try to solve this problem in policy. And it's standards, regulations, liabilities, international agreements. And I want to talk about two things I think especially appropriate to this room. First is a policy principle, second is a tech principle. The policy principle is that defense must dominate. That there's one world, one network, one answer. Right? So traditionally, in national security, in electronic espionage, in Keith Alexander's world, the NSA had two missions. One was to defend US stuff, the other was to attack foreign stuff. And that was really worked during the Cold War because, let's face it, our stuff and your stuff were different. And you could do that. Today you can't. Today everyone uses the same stuff. Everyone uses iPhones and TCP/IP and Cisco routers and Microsoft Word and PDF files. So we really have a choice. Right? We have either we have security for everyone, including the people we don't want to have security, or we have insecurity for everyone, including people we want to have security. And lots of examples of this offense-defense balance being decided for defense, and it needs to change for offense. The second principle, which is more tech, is that we need to build in resilience. We need to broaden our concept of security from defense to resilience. That if we're going to live in a world where an internet-connected toothbrush designed by a company that's out of business and can't be updated can affect national security, that's fundamentally bad. And the only way to fix that is to put things in the network that keep that toothbrush from affecting security. I mean, these are real easy principles. The hard part is how to get from here to there. Right? Fundamentally, markets can't solve this because these are all externalities. What we need more of is government intervention. Now, of course, there's going to be a lot of problems. The devil's in the details. I spent a lot of time in my book on the details. But I think governments are going to get involved regardless, right? Because the risks are too great and the stakes are too high. That it was very easy for government to step back and say, internet companies do what you want, when it fundamentally didn't matter. But when it affects life and property, they're going to change. Right? And I give this talk in Silicon Valley a lot, where it's a very, very libertarian, anti-government crowd. And I say, look, your choice is no longer between government involvement and no government involvement. Your choice is between smart government involvement and stupid government involvement. Right? And looking at what we need to do now before there's a crisis is incredibly valuable. And I think regulations will incent private industry. This notion that regulation stifles innovation, I think it's a canard that's not true. I mean, my problem right now is I have a lot of tech that there's no market for. Companies don't buy it because they don't need to. But if we increase the penalties of getting security wrong, then we'll get security right. And Europe is moving this direction. GDPR is I think, an important innovation, trying to make companies liable for bad privacy. Extending that to security will do a lot. And again, I don't see an alternative. So these problems are hard. They're not going away. But we need to bring the tools of statecraft onto the tech industry, recognizing that the age where consumer tech and military tech were different are over. That all tech is now national security. That all tech is critical tech. We're too interconnected, and the computers are too powerful. Right? Automation, autonomy, and physical agency. Don't worry about AI. Right? The risks are here well before that. So thank you very much. I will be here all day. Please find me during lunch. Thank you.